Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today for the Real World Leadership Summer Colloquium. Before we get started, I did want to mention we have some additional guests with us tonight. We have about 6 or 7. Hi, you can take a seat. I think there's one hot seat up front on either side of Kathy. So we have about 6 or 7 of our student steering committee members with us tonight, as well as you can see, some members of our marketing department to capture tonight's session. We'll follow the format the same as last week. We're all introduce Kathy. She'll give a brief background and provide you with some topic areas on leadership, and then we'll open the floor to the Q&A session. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kathy Walker with us here. She's not only the managing director of OpenAir Equity Partners, which is a venture capital firm focused on investments and early stage technology innovation, but has also been heavily involved in boards. One of which is our Kummer Institute's foundation board. And if you all are not aware, the Kummer Institute does report to this foundation board that meets on a quarterly basis to provide updates on capital projects, financials, initiatives, which includes student programming. In turn, the board provides guidance and resolutions on how we approach those initiatives. Kathy is also a Missouri S&T alumna. She earned her master's degree in engineering management. You all received her bio, so there are more details and information about her experiences and accomplishments. But otherwise, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, and thanks for coming tonight. I thought maybe what I would do is just kind of quickly go through the story of my career a little bit. And then what I want to do is perhaps touch on the topic of when I look backwards, what are the missed opportunities to take advantage of leadership learning opportunities, and perhaps give you all some ideas of things that you could seize and take hold of now, and experiences that might have made me better prepared for some of the roles that I had as I achieved them in my career. I was born and raised in South Dakota in a small town of 200 people. My father was a member of the staff at the land-grant university that was nearby, and my mom was a part-time bookkeeper. I was really blessed because my dad thought girls could do anything, so pick what you want to do and you better get after it. That was his mindset. And my mother had never gone to college, and so she thought that was extremely important to go to college, to get a degree, because no matter what happened to you, you could earn a living. So those were kind of the two thrusts as I, went through up to and through high school. And my friends laughed because they said, I think you really believed that you couldn't quit after high school. I think you thought you had to go to college. And it was like, oh yes, I knew that I was going to go to college. So I got my civil engineering degree. And one of the smart things I did in my undergrad while I was at South Dakota State was I took advantage of getting to know my advisor. And Dr. Ali Salim was a graduate of University of Missouri-Rolla. That's what it was called at the time I went. And as I went through my curriculum, he said to me, you're always so interested in the big picture. Potentially, there's a different path to take in engineering, and that's engineering management. Take advantage of learning about business and finances and economic analysis, and perhaps that married with engineering would be a better choice for you. And so off I went after investigating it and came here for my master's degree. And I had the advantage of having as my grad advisor here, Dr. Bernie Sarche, who was the founder of the department. And so some lucky breaks there in taking advantage of my advisors doing the college years. And that is one thing I would tell you is they've seen so many students. And so when they look at you and they put their focus on you, they can see things that are common about you or unique about you, and perhaps give you some insights that you haven't yet learned about yourself. So taking advantage of your advisor or a trusted instructor and hearing what they have to say is really, really helpful. Off I went after college, and I started at a company. Well, I started in the Bell system. The Bell system broke up about that time, and I moved to a company that became Sprint. And at the time, Sprint was laying a nationwide fiber optic network. I was an entry-level engineer there. And 24 years later, after having roles in engineering and operations and human resources and product development and customer service, all those different departments, I was able to retire. And I retired as the chief network officer. And at that point in time, I had 14,500 employees. I had a capital budget of $8 billion, and I had an annual expense budget of $2.5 to $3 billion. So a lot happened from the point in time of being in charge of myself to being in charge of a lot of money, a lot of people, and a very important part of the service that we were marketing on a nationwide basis. My next chapter then was at the grand old age of 50 years old. I knew I didn't want to retire, but I wanted to make some changes. And I wanted to be a little bit more in charge of my schedule. I wanted to be there for aging parents. And I also felt like I could try something that was a little bit more risky because I had done the corporate thing and I had made good savings choices during that period of time. So I could do something that had a bit of a steeper learning curve and had a little bit more risk in it. So I joined a very small venture capital firm, and we were very, very early investors in the Internet of Things. So we have in our portfolio, we have a connected car company, we have a connected home company. My partner was one of the founders of GoGo InFlight, which was the internet on the airplane. And how many of you have been into the cell phone store, taken your phone in, sold it back and gotten your new one, and you've gotten money for that? We developed that process. We came out of the wireless industry, and we knew there was a lot of money in those phones, that there was still a lot of residual value. And so we developed this scalable way to be able to recycle those phones so that the carrier could make money. You could feel better about this phone that you were upgrading on an annual basis. And because of the sustainability and the recycling capability of it, you could put it back into use. And we sold that company to an insurance carrier a few years ago. So those are some of the things that I've done in the venture capital space. Very different kinds of leadership opportunities, more influencing and helping management in that role. And then board work. Board work where you're looking at the strategy, you're making sure that governance is sound. For public companies, you're making sure compliance is attended to. And you're providing oversight to the management team. Right now, I spend more of my time in board work at Missouri S&T, at South Dakota State, at a public company named Adtran, and at 4 of the startups that I'm an investor in. So that's kind of the chapters of my life, and I would imagine you all will have similar multiple slices as you go out in the workplace. Working one place for 20 plus years is kind of a huge anomaly. And probably the only reason I did that was because I probably had 15 different jobs in that period of time. So it was always challenging and different. If you have any questions on that, it might be a good time to do that. Otherwise, what I want to do is turn to maybe what some missed opportunities in leadership were. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, so that's me in the probably more than a minute. Sorry about that. So looking backward and thinking about leadership opportunities, right now is a really great time for you all to be seizing opportunities to develop your leadership skills. And so I have a question, which is, could you raise your hand? How many of you are in student organizations or Greek organizations or other groups where you have taken a role as perhaps an officer or a committee leader? How many? Terrific. Terrific. That was a wisdom item that I did not take advantage of myself. And part of it was I thought I was really busy. And, you know, I got involved in those groups. I knew it would look good on my resume, but there's a deeper reason why you do that. And the reason that you do that is you want to learn to lead and influence people. And in the university setting, hopefully you'll run into a very broad cross-section of people, and you'll be able to try out your skills in influencing them, encouraging them, creating a shared set of values with them. So taking advantage of that is really important. Even just being on a student team, taking the role that nobody wants. It's an important role perhaps, but it's not a glamorous role. But what can you do to really take that role and turn it into a source of momentum for the team? And those are all opportunities to develop some of the building blocks to being a good leader. And the second thing is there's probably a whole lot of people walking around. I know there's a whole group of alumni inside of the Engineering Management Academy that have their hands up to be mentors to all of you. And at times, I think when you're at the point in your career where you are right now, you might think, well, what am I going to ask them? You know, and really, what do they know about your first job out of college? Because they've all been out 15, 20, 25 years. Well, one thing they can help you with is they can help you with, as leaders of organizations, how do they evaluate the skills they want to see in the leaders in the organization? They can help you with the kinds of things to develop, the skills to showcase, some of the roles to take that might not be the glamorous ones, but sometimes those are the roles that are the individuals who move ahead because they've demonstrated grit or fortitude or strategy. So taking advantage of some of those individuals who want to mentor and provide you advice is kind of a good idea. And listening to others that perhaps, or developing others who have graduated a couple years ago. Hopefully those that'll share with you what they're learning on the job and what they wish they would have tried when they were still in school. Because now, other than grades, is a really good time to try something and maybe not do 100% or not get an A+ on it. Because the sphere of people that will be present for it will not be likely with you on the job or other places where you want to advance your career. So trying now, when the cost of failure and the cost of learning is lower, is really something that I wish I would have done more of. I also had the usual need to hear positive things. And we all need that. We all need a little bit of a boost to hear what we do well. But you need to also find the time, find the person, and find the point when you're strong enough to listen carefully to hear the things you don't do as well. Some of them are not going to be critical to where you want to go. Some of them will be. And you want to develop your leadership brand, your leadership set of skills. So it's not a good idea to read a book and model yourself after that book and try and do everything that is in that individual process, because it won't fit on you. I really kind of think about leadership like a fingerprint. They're all unique. And you're going to have some things in common with others that you're in class with, or others that you grew up with, or that you've been trained with. But you're also going to have unique skills that perhaps are things that are outside of your education or outside of your work interests. And finding ways to bring that into the leadership situation is what is going to make you unique and be very authentic for each of you. Does that make sense? Does that resonating at all? Now is the time of ripe opportunity. I think your peers, I think probably as I interact with students now, you do a better job of working in teams, of developing peer feedback and talking to each other. But you need feedback of people that you're trying to provide direction to, and you need feedback from people who are giving you direction. So you get 360 degrees of how you're developing in areas that you might be very strong or that you might have some growing to do. And this is a good place to begin to practice those kinds of things. Checking in on how to be authentic. If it feels like you do something different in a high visibility situation than you do in your everyday, and it feels play acting or put upon or a role that you're stepping into, perhaps you haven't yet found your authentic self. Because it should be pretty comfortable, and it should be pretty steady. The higher you go in a large organization with more people trying to follow you, the more important it is that you're steady and you're predictable. When you're just in charge of yourself, you can make those sharp turns and you can pivot and change your mind and do those things without a lot of people trying to keep up with you. But if people at the top of very large organizations do that on a regular basis, it's really, really hard for them to do their job. Putting off working on your communication skills isn't a good idea. You're going to have to learn to speak in one-on-one situations, in casual situations, in high visibility situations, being on television, being on the radio, writing to an organization and having thousands of people read it and needing for them to understand exactly what you're trying to communicate. And you'll have help, obviously, but really speaking in acronyms, which was a technology challenge, was to speak to the marketing organization or other groups and not use acronyms. That was really hard to break. Speaking to customers who are stressed out and you have ruined their world because your stuff's not working. Learning how to communicate with them is very difficult, but extremely important. And I think the best leader, the best moments of leadership for me was when what I wanted of my organization was what I was showing them, what I was telling them, and what I was rewarding in the organization. And when I did all those things well, it felt like the organization had its greatest momentum. Let me pause there and see if you guys have questions about missed opportunities and maybe ideas on things that you could be doing now and taking with you. Yes.
So not exactly missed opportunities, but for you personally, did you have any situations where, because of your determination or because you were able to spot something, were you able to get a leadership position that you otherwise wouldn't have?
Yes. I was a big hand raiser, so there were lots of new technology opportunities at Sprint through the years. And one of the principles that we tried to have was we tried to put people into the new roles that were difficult to lose from the core organization. Maybe didn't know everything, but they had a lot of energy and they had a lot of intelligence and curiosity. And so because I demonstrated those things in what were kind of boring jobs, my boring job was I was the director of field records and digitizing the field records. And that is a snoozer. I mean, obviously you don't want to say that. There's some wonderful people that are excited about it and they're paying attention to all the details. But for me, that was a snoozer. But I tried to do it as well as I could, to be creative in it. And when the opportunity to come and do something new came about, because I had a good attitude about what I'd been doing, because I volunteered, and because I had demonstrated curiosity and a focused way to keep learning, teaching myself, going to schools that they offered, all those things, I was able to take on additional roles around all that. So it's good to raise your hand. It's not good to oversell what you know or what you have expertise in. Most of the time, if you have enthusiasm, you've demonstrated you can teach yourself things, and you have a high sense of curiosity and learning, people will give you that shot. One of the things I did was I developed a set of guiding principles, and they were called the Walker Guiding Principles. When I had a new team, half of them knew me, half of them didn't. And I got the advice, hey, make it so your new team knows you. So write down what's important to you, make it easy to follow you. So I had a list of things like, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them proportionally. And put the dead back in deadline. And when you forward something to me, I assume you have read it, you're recommending it, and you've approved it. Don't just give me your email to read. So there were a lot of those things that really kind of laid out what I expected of the people that work for me. And one of them that everyone enjoyed was surprises, never appropriate for work, always welcome at home, anniversaries, birthdays, etc. But surprising someone at work is not a welcome thing. So when you mess up, fess up. When you're missing a deadline, let people know. Don't play chicken and run your project off the cliff. There's always somebody else that's probably off schedule too, and there's a game of corporate chicken to see who raises their hand first. I didn't feel like I was ever punished for telling the truth. So I would tell you, don't play that game. It's a high stakes game, and it can knock you out of contention and ascension inside of companies when you do things like that. Good question. What else? Yes.
How did you get comfortable receiving feedback from both those above you and those below you?
I took advantage of the vehicles that are out there. So there's like the 360 feedback where you get it from above, below, and around you. And how you use that tool is important. You can give it to your friends that are your peers, or you can give it to the people you're really having trouble with working constructively. I would choose people whose voice I really wanted to hear. And I felt like since it was anonymous, they probably would tell me. I would manage the timing of the doses of when I took in what I knew to be critical. And I made it a practice to always thank someone. Say, thank you for taking the time. You know, that's sincere. Thank you for taking the time. Might be that I thought what they said wasn't applicable or I wasn't going to do it, but they took the time to tell me something. and I appreciated that. And I made it a habit, and it becomes easier when it is a habit. You know, like anything, you don't think about it as much. So taking advantage of those things. I also found people later in my career who I knew in my heart that they really wanted the very best for me. So what we worked out was I wanted them to tell me what I needed to hear. And because I knew that they were really rooting for me to move up, they were a voice I could listen to, and not discount it and think they had an agenda. And so finding those people that have the ability to tell you those things and you can hear them, those are important additions to your circle of advisors. The gentleman adjacent to you, you had a question?
Yeah, I know, because you talked about like the importance of improving your communication in both like personal and in larger audiences. For especially the larger audiences, how do you recommend going about that as like for us in instance, because we don't have a lot of time spent speaking to the masses?
Well, you know, there are different situations when you get out in the workplace. There are different ways that you can take those presenting opportunities. So early on, it was going to industry conferences, agreeing to be on a panel, agreeing to be a speaker, and being in those 100, 200 kinds of things that were maybe more technical. So taking advantage of those. Then when I had a team of a significant size, it was committing to webcasts. And then because I needed to practice my skills when they couldn't see me, I had a practice of I had people that worked at night. And so I would have a conference call at night, and I would present what had gone on in the prior quarter, and I would speak to the night crew and take questions from them. So trying to find those big and small opportunities in all those different formats, because once you get a core set of capability, the way you get ready for those is similar. And the other thing is always, for me, it was always over-prepare so you have the ability to be spontaneous. So think about what you want to say, but if everybody else would ask the questions, that's probably going to be a better interaction.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
As one of your missed opportunities, you talked about that you felt you didn't do enough early on and you missed some things. And you tied that to being that you thought you were too busy then. Were there any like strategies or like looking back to find, am I really too busy? Like to know, when am I too busy, or am I just being lazy? You know?
Or am I not seeing all the benefit that might accrue to me? I don't know if there's a strategy associated with it other than carefully looking at those opportunities and knowing that they're building blocks. If you have career aspirations, to maybe choose a few of those that feel like they're in and of themselves not a high priority, but you can build your leadership skills. I think one of the most important things is learning to assess people quickly and then living with them either in class or in a project or whatever. I'm finding out in my initial assessment what I got wrong and then assessing additional people, so that one of the things that I could do very quickly in my career was size up my team and know where strengths were, know where development might be needed. And I think I would have gotten a lot better at that more quickly if I'd have done some of the roles earlier. Project management roles, maybe officers or committee leaders that have to kind of get people rallied around something. But I never saw a down the road use for it. I was always very ambitious. You know, I wanted to do well in my career, but I didn't connect those two things as being helpful. So I don't know if that's a strategy or perhaps a longer term view of it.
Was there anything that like now looking on then that you were able to like realize that maybe like then you thought you were too busy, but then now you're looking back on it or like, you know, I really wasn't that busy. Is there anything that helped you like?
You know, no, I think some of it is just hindsight. I remember a systems project for Dr. Klusny. It was a team of 3. I had really done a lot of work in the team. And I thought the next thing that I wanted to do was take a break. And as I think about it now, I had 2 teammates that it would have been a learning experience to figure out how to spend more time to get them focused on their work and for us to come together with a better project. But for me at that time, it was the weather's nice. I'd like to go do something else. So and at that age, I'm not claiming myself as one of the particularly mature students, but I thought that you know that I was busy. Sorry about that. That's the God's truth on that one. Yeah.
Have you ever had times where you almost felt empty because you weren't doing enough? Or that like you wish you had been doing more at that time, either at that time or looking back on it?
No, I don't think so. At times I think that I overcommitted, and probably the hindsight is the selection of the things that I spent my time on maybe didn't have the same value against the values that I hold today. My family, my parents were extremely important to me. One of the rude things that happened to me was when I left corporate America, I found out that my parents had more health problems than I knew, and that they weren't sharing all of it with me because they thought I was very busy and I had a very difficult job. So in my second chapter of venture investing, I needed that flexibility to be able to take them to the Mayo Clinic for their appointments and those kind of things. So I think it's maybe I changed on what my values were, and then in hindsight, wish that I had changed those earlier is more my norm. Yes, the gentleman next to you. You, yes. Sorry about that.
So because I know you said earlier it's okay to try things if the cost of failure is much lower. So one thing I wanted to ask was if you could share with us a time where you had failed early on, and then later on where having overcome that failure had actually helped you in your field. If that made sense at all.
Yeah. Well, I think as a leadership failure, maybe more it was demonstrating leadership failure. My first job that I took at the Bell system was in Wisconsin Bell, and you should all know the reason they hired me was because I had an engineering management degree from this university, and they wanted to put one into their management development program. So I was lucky enough to be the one they hired associated with that. The failure I had was more of a clue phone failure, you know, that you probably shouldn't do this. And what I told them, the approach I took was the Bell system was breaking up. I was on a promotional track at Wisconsin Bell, and I shared with them that I wanted to be back closer to my boyfriend, now husband, who was in Kansas City. And so I'd really like them to transfer me to Southwestern Bell. Not the most corporate aware kind of conversation to have with them. And I think after that, most of my training activities and investment in me kind of slowed down after that, because I had signaled I wasn't willing to, you know, stay the course in Wisconsin. The way that it turned out better for me was I decided that the one thing that I had learned at Wisconsin Bell was I was working with fiber optics. I had worked with the people installing it in the field. I had had the opportunity to talk to customers about it on how and why it would be wonderful in their business, et cetera. And I decided that was one of the things I liked best about my job. And so I sent out a single resume to a company in Kansas City that was at the time called US Telephone, later Sprint, and got a job there. And everything there was brand new because it was a brand new company. So, you know, sitting down in the middle of your job, making a muck of it, but then really examining what gives you the most excitement, what do you want to do, what's your favorite part of the day, and then trying to find a role that would plunk you smack in the middle of that all the time. It turned out great for me. I would caution that you not do it that way because it was a low before I changed jobs to find yourself being with all the individuals that are on a path and have these great training opportunities, and then suddenly to have found yourself with your foot in your mouth and not sure what that next step's going to be. But it happens. Yeah. Yes.
Was it difficult to like manage all your leadership positions with your personal life?
Yes, it was. It was. My husband is also a graduate of S&T. He has a civil engineering undergrad and a master's in engineering management. And he was a very, very flexible partner in all of it, because there were times where my friends actually told me, you're unreliable. You don't show up for us. And so I would make corrections to try and be more reliable. I was never going to be the person that joined the bowling team and was there all the time without ever having to have a substitute, but I could show up for the most important things. And I thought I was doing pretty well. But I think it was quite a surprise. I know it was quite a surprise to me when I shifted and was able to take on more of a caregiving role for my parents. So I think it's a balancing act. You're never going to get it right in a single day or a single week. But I think if you look back, the practice I developed was I look back over the last quarter and I think about what did I do in my work pursuits and what did I do in my personal pursuits, and did I attend the things I wanted to? Did I learn the things that I wanted to? Did I show up at the places that were the most important to me? And if I didn't, then I make a course correction going forward. And if I do that more frequently, they're much smaller changes than perhaps when I didn't have that practice.
It was like a lot more difficult when you were working at
Sprint, yeah. It was a 24-hour job. And the way that my leadership brand was, I'm not asking anyone on my team to do anything I'm not willing to do. So I would be on the bridge at night if the customer was important enough. Not that I was a problem solver, but sometimes what I had to do was to be present, to signal to the customer. It was important to them and it was important to our company too. So you do those things, but you know your role. You know, you're not qualified anymore to be the engineer that's driving the fix associated with it. And so you're there to perhaps catch the complaints and allow people the best environment that are best equipped to fix something. And it takes a lot of time. It's very rewarding. I thought I had the best team in the world because I had technology people, and technology people under promise and over deliver usually. And so that's a wonderful situation to be in versus groups that over promise and consistently under deliver. That's a pretty tough team to lead. And so it was fun because you got to help people understand what they were capable of and accomplish things they never thought they could do. Yes.
Yeah, earlier you were talking about the topic of feeling overcommitted at times. How do you go about assessing if you are overcommitted? And if so, like what's your advice for not being overcommitted, but like while still getting value out of that?
So how do you know? For me, the way that I know when I'm overcommitted is when I have really busy sleep, like sleep where my mind is racing and I wake up and I'm not refreshed and I'm thinking of little snippets of ideas or things that I put on my mental list while I was sleeping. That's when I know that I'm overcommitted. I don't have any great tips on how to prioritize what you have your hand up for. Everything's going to go through burst periods and calm periods. And probably my advice would be first assessing, are you taking advantage of the calm periods to do something restorative for yourself so that you can better handle the intermittent kinds of spurts that come with it. The second part would be really assessing yourself and seeing if you're a procrastinator and if you're doing it to yourself. People who have really high standards, perfectionists, are really not usually, that's an overgeneralization, frequently procrastinators. And so if there are new habits and strategies that you can embrace, you can perhaps shave some of the top off of the peak. And I had some of that. But I think the signal for me is the non-restful sleep. I mean, it's enough hours, but it isn't enough restorative. You know, I wake up in the morning, I'm excited, I've got energy and maybe some new ideas how to tackle something. If I don't have that kind of a mindset, then I probably do have too much on my plate for me. Other questions? Yes.
I remembered earlier someone had asked about when do you find time to do opportunities, like if you're too lazy or too busy to them. So, but I was going to ask about the flip side of that is how do you find these opportunities like in college or work or just life in general? Because you said like this time right now is the best to do that. But for people who have never done that before, where's the stepping off point to start?
Well, I would start with a conversation with your advisor to talk about what kind of organizations, student organizations are. I think there's a lot of groups that are centered around perhaps your interests and finding those resources on campus, people that have like interest in perhaps your hobbies or areas where you're teaching yourself more and trying to find if there's any groups associated with that. In the non-campus setting, there's a whole lot of things, meetups around topics like that, and finding individuals maybe that don't have anything to do with where you work, but you share a common interest in an activity, and trying a few of those and seeing if those work for you, if they feel comfortable, and if you feel like you could get something out of it. You're going to have to try a few venues that probably don't work, so don't expect 100% or a first-time fit. I wandered off when I saw someone doing something interesting. I would just ask them, where did you learn that? How did you get exposed to that? And sometimes that individual, then it just became a one-to-one, a new person that I met. So really authentic curiosity can open the doors for you to perhaps find some of those opportunities. That would be my advice. Yes?
In your opinion, what is one of the most commonly missed opportunities that students don't take?
I think it is finding those couple of individuals here in the university setting that will be voices that can help you navigate when you leave. Not your friends, because you're gonna naturally do the things to keep your friends, hopefully. And it's easier now with all the digital tools to be able to keep up with people, but finding a couple of further in their career voices that can help you when you navigate disappointments or bad assignments or difficult work colleagues that aren't right in the company you're working in. Because you can't assume that everything you share to a close colleague in the same company is held in confidence. You always learn that. Someone's going to disappoint you. But if you have someone from a prior chapter and they're a steady, good, common sense advisor, you can always call them up. And sometimes it's just to let off steam, but sometimes it's something they've encountered before. And it doesn't have to be someone who's in their 60s. It can be somebody that's 5 or 6 years older than you, that's, a couple chapters ahead of you. But finding those people to get you started in the work environment that aren't of your workplace, I think that's a mistake not to find that while you're here. There were questions. Yes.
In a situation such as a interview or a speech, how do you overcome a fear of failure and gain confidence, like both in the moment and preemptively?
Over preparing was how I gained confidence. And so over preparing meant I had lots of additional material that I wasn't delivering in the speech. But if someone asked me, I knew more than just what I was delivering in my prepared remarks. I practiced in front of a mirror. I practiced in front of trusted people that would take the time to listen to me try and give my opinion. Or would give me their opinion after I gave my remarks and would tell me what my bad habits were. That's one of my bad habits. And I'm aware of it. I haven't conquered it, but it was pointed out by someone who cared about me and wanted me to improve my communication. So finding those people that will invest in you, but that also means you invest in other people. You have to provide that support for someone else. And it's a good rule, give to get kind of thing. For interviews, I have a nephew that is a junior at KU, and I have another nephew that is in his early 30s. He and his friends set up mock interviews for the junior at KU's to practice before he went in for his intern interview. So he had someone, one of the friends, so he didn't know him, because sometimes if it's a person you know, that's too comfortable. So enlisting someone else to help you to do a mock interview and then giving feedback on it and giving him homework. And he came to me and he had this spiral notebook full of things that they had told him about and answers that he wanted to give and all this other stuff. And his interview was the next day, and he came to my house, and I sat him down with a beer and said, "Settle down. You can't take your notebook to the interview. You need to read over your notes, trust that it's inside of you and in your head, and tomorrow you have to be yourself. Because at the end of the day, they're hiring you. And you know this stuff, you have great grades, you have a good attitude, you've shown that you can learn. Those are terrific things to take to a job. And you should find examples of those attributes to be able to share in an interview." So I think it's the preparing part, being done with that, and then it is having someone talk you down and help you bring yourself to the interview, so that you can present yourself and find out if they're a match for you and you're a match for them. Does that help?
Yeah, that was a lot, thank you.
Did you have a question further down the table there? Any other? Yes.
Do you have any inspiring, whether it be books or quotes or individuals you've encountered along your career that you kind of keep with you?
You know, one of the hardest, very hardest leadership things that I ever read. It was so simple, but boy, was it hard to implement. And it was a book, I cannot remember the title of it, and I'm sorry, he's a very prolific author. But I had the opportunity to hear Patrick Lencioni. And he writes those little fable books. They're real small and easy to read. They're like an airplane read. And the notion behind it was, your team is not the people who work for you. Your team is your peers. And so, you know, if you have 100 parts of energy, don't put all your energy into the people that work for you. You have to put energy into making the marketing team successful and supporting the finance organization to build a good model of what product you build, and prepare the customer service organization to support this new thing that we're doing. Those peers are your number one team in achieving success. And that was probably one of the hardest things to do as far as implementing behaviors that way. It's easy to invest in the people that work for you because they're helping you achieve your goals. Your peers don't always think that you're their number one team. And so supporting them and finding that alignment is a much more challenging thing. But when you do it, it's a beautiful thing and lots of momentum results. So that for me was the hardest one. I'm not reading leadership books so much anymore. Right now the one I'm reading through is Chip Wars. And it's because in the boardroom, we do a lot less, leadership is different in the boardroom. Part of what you're doing in the boardroom is management executes the plan. They're going to lead the organization. So part of what you're trying to do is to provide good advice and maybe some ideas that you can sell to them. And when they adopt it, if they adopt an idea and in a month they think it was their own idea, that's the best thing you can do as a board member, is have that advice embraced, owned, improved, and implemented. Yes.
I know earlier you talked about leaving Bell to join what is now Sprint. How do you make like those decisions and analyze the risks that come with it to make sure that you are not making a detrimental decision?
You would have to find a better way than I did, because I was just my feelings were hurt that they kicked me out of the management program. I thought, well, they're idiots. So I got to go. And naively, I only sent out one resume and found a job. I can't claim that I was very bright in making that change. It turned out wonderful for me. I think the risk assessment is, can you change anything about the place you're at? And I think the other risk in making a change is, do you have enough headspace to be really, really clear about what you want to move towards? So many times people make a job change and they're leaving what they're doing in their current job, and they're not really taking the time to say, what do I want my next job to be? The good things from where I am and different things. And they're just, I need to get away from here. And that is rarely turns out well. For me it did, but you know, that was a low probability kind of move around it. So I guess you can survive some of those dumb mistakes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Have you ever had a moment where your values of leadership dramatically shifted from maybe not just one form of leadership to another, but like how you view leadership as a whole shifted?
You know, I don't know if this is a good example to answer that. So when I left Sprint after 25 years, the reason I left was I knew I was a good leader of a large organization, but what we were on a path to do was to outsource 9,000 jobs. And so I was no longer going to manage people. I was going to manage an outsourcer. And I knew I didn't want to do that. And I knew that, unfortunately, I'm not very good at faking it. And so my performance usually at things I don't like to do is lower. So I decided it was a good time to retire. And it wasn't necessarily that my values changed, but my circumstance, based on the momentum of what the CEO wanted to do, was definitely going to change. And I had the opportunity to nicely exit, and so I took it. But you know, at that point, I'd been in the workforce for a really long time, and so I had a pretty good view of what I like to do, the parts of my job that were interesting to me, and the parts of my job that I needed to pay attention to because they would bite me if I didn't pay attention to them. And so that's a benefit that you get as you have more experiences in the workplace. Yes.
How do you deal with sort of uncertainty about making decisions as a leader?
Well, first of all, I think you have to be candid. You have to pressure test what is really fact and what is strong opinion, and sometimes that's really, really hard to separate. And it gets more challenging as you go up in the organization because you no longer have the time to do the primary research to look at alternatives. More typically, people are bringing you alternatives and you're selecting among them or creating some amalgam of those choices. I think you have to develop a gut around it that says, all of my past experiences say this is risky or not baked, and we need to do more work. And typically, if you've stayed operationally close, you have a good idea where you're inserting risk. And part of your responsibility is knowing whether or not the organization can bear that risk at that point in time. In the service business, customer satisfaction risk is a real currency, and it has a dollar figure on it. And the dollar figure is far beyond the people who answer the phone and the people who leave, disconnect and vote with their feet. It's the people that will never try you. It's the people who tell the bad stories, because bad stories get told 10 times more often than a good story is a rule of thumb people think about. So putting that risk into consequences, and then that's where, if you work with your peers, having that debate among yourselves really comes up with better decisions. Mm-hmm.
We have time for one more question if you want to go ahead, but I also have a question if you don't mind asking at the end, but you go ahead.
Is there a book that you would recommend for people just starting out?
You know what? I want to go home and look up my bookshelf. And can I send it to you, Jackie, and have you send it out? Perfect. perfect. I shall do that. Thank you.
My question is, as a female leader, in multiple levels of leadership, how did you overcome any challenges? And on the other hand, how did you manage counterparts and becoming a successful leader and getting that trust from, counterparts and earning that, that collaboration?
When I assess whether it was an advantage or a disadvantage to being a female, and I would tell you, when I started in engineering, it was like 7-to-1, I think, males to females, so it was a rare thing. And my experience in the early stages was that I was always more noticed. So what happened was, if I screwed up, it got talked about in more places and lasted longer. But the same thing happened when I did something well. And so what I tried to do so that I wouldn't get focused on the negative and rail against something that perhaps I couldn't change, I really worked hard on trying to make sure that the things that I accomplished, the positive things, added up to more than the screw ups. So that I could manage kind of the buzz about me. It was always different to be in the technology role inside of the company. More typically, the customer service role and the HR role are the at the corporate level, the ones that more frequently have women in them. But I did those jobs, too, during my rotation, and I think just I gutted it out, and I think I worked as hard or harder than anybody else around the table was the way that I coped with it. That came with a little bit of a cost associated with working too much, a bit of a workaholic by all definitions of it. But I got a lot of joy out of the things that I accomplished too. So I don't have any stories where a door was not open to me or any corporate horror stories around all that. But I did find a lot of frustration when I screwed up that everybody seemed to know it, and it buzzed around pretty darn fast. So that was when I decided to flip it.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Kathy. If we could all give her a round of applause. Yes, I'll send out the email on the book that you would recommend. That's this group.
Yep. And I will go and see if there's an author that I recommend too. If I can take a little bit more time, I will look at my bookshelf and see that. But thank you all. Thank you. It was a joy to be here this evening. I appreciate your time and your attention.